for people to take and watch. So let's go ahead and get started with our Minnesota State Poultry project. Like I was saying, there's a ton of options in the Minnesota State Poultry project. You can have ducks, chickens, geese, turkeys, guineas, pigeons, and doves. And there's 22 different classes in all if you take and show all of them. And actually there's even more than that possibly. There's also, I should have put posters on here. There's a poultry poster class too that can be shown at most county fairs and at the state fair. So there should be, I should have had a poster on here too. So you can do posters. So you don't even have to raise chickens to really be involved with the poultry project. You can do the poster thing. Some general information. All the birds that we show at the county fair have to be hatched on or after January 1st, except for breeding pigeons and breeding doves. They can be old birds. They can be over a year old. Chickens and turkeys have to have health papers from the hatcheries. If you get your birds from a hatchery, it'll be called a statement of origin. You can request that. I would request it when you order your birds. Otherwise, if you raise your own birds, you have to have them tested, and you have to have a pleurum typhoid papers. A tester has to test your birds, and you have to have a pleurum typhoid paper to take and submit. And I think they do that mostly online nowadays. So you upload it online. But I like to have it at the fair. I'm a superintendent at the fair. I like to see a copy of it when the birds come in because I don't know if it's been turned in or not. So and it just makes life easier for me if a copy of it gets brought to the fair also. And make yourself several copies of that too, those papers, so that you have them, because they do have a tendency, I think, to kind of disappear at times. So all your birds at the fair have to be banded. I think a lot of fairs now are supplying the bands. They'll band them and you take and enter your birds, but if not, you have to get some leg bands for your birds. Alright, so let's start out with the different classes. We'll start out with chickens. We have different types of chickens that we can take and show. The first one I'm going to talk about are purebred chickens, breeding chickens. These are pretty chickens, let's put it that way. They're for show, for looks, although a lot of the breeds are used for egg production or for meat. Some of them are strictly pretty much just a pretty bird. So if you're going to take and raise purebred chickens, thing to keep in mind is that at the fair you bring one male and you bring two females of the same breed and variety. Now, when I talk about breed is like the outline, the shape of the bird. The variety is the color of the bird. Okay, so you have one breed, but you might have several varieties within that breed. We have several different colors within that breed. So that's when you hear breed and variety, that's what we're talking about. Now, in breeding chickens, we have two classes. We have large fowl and we have bantams. Every large fowl breed has a bantam or miniature version of it, except for a few. There's just a couple that don't do that, but almost every large fowl breed has a miniature of that same breed. And the hatch dates, large fowls, there's some of the large fowls are probably already hatched. It's January 5th, and I'm sure some of them are out and running around already, because it just takes a long time for large fowl breeds to mature and to be ready for the county fair or the state fair even. And bantams, some of them are being hatched also now, but they tend to grow a little bit faster and they take and mature a little bit faster too. So they can be hatched a little bit later, so we can do that. Now, where can you get them? Well, you can get them from a breeder or you can get them from a hatchery. Now, keep in mind that they have two different goals. Breeders and hatcheries have two different goals. A hatchery's goal is to take and sell chicks. That's how they stay in business. So they'll sell chicks. They'll look somewhat like the breed, but they tend to be, in the large fowl breeds, they tend to be a little bit smaller than what's what's being taken and asked for, and in the Bantam breeds they tend to be a little bit bigger than what's asked for in the standard of perfection. The standard of perfection is how the purebred birds are judged against. It's a book put out by the American Poultry Association. I got a little picture of it here, and it has a description of each breed, and most of the breeds have pictures of what they should take and look like. So that's what they're judged against, is that standard. When I go out to judge a county fair, I'm looking for the pen of birds that comes closest to what the standard calls for. And that would be the pen that would win that particular class. So if you're going to raise purebred birds, it's nice to have a standard because that tells you what they're supposed to look like. And you can get that from the American Poultry Association. I think most counties do have a copy of the American Poultry Association's Standard Perfection book at the office, so you can go there to take and look at it, and maybe take and see what your breed is supposed to look like. So the hatcheries will take and they produce birds, and like I said, they'll kind of look like they're supposed to look, but they're not necessarily have all the fine tuning points to them and that sort of stuff, because that's not what the hatchery's trying to do. They're selling chicks. Where a breeder, they're trying to make it look like the book. Now the thing is that when we try to make it look like the book, we do like line breeding, and the birds are bigger and that kind of stuff, so they tend not to lay quite as much, and they tend not to reproduce quite as well. So if a hatchery tried to do all that, they wouldn't be selling a lot of chicks, and they wouldn't take and be in business. So there's two different goals. Hatcheries are great, I think, for beginners to try to figure out which breeds they like to take and raise. But once you figure out that, oh, I really like to raise Buff Orpingtons. We've got 2 Orpington guys on here, so I'm going to talk about Orpingtons. You really want to raise those Buff Orpingtons. Well, then it's time to take and once you decide that's really what you want to concentrate on, it's time to find a breeder that'll take and help you, or supply you with some chicks, or buy some chicks from them, or get some breeding stock from them, so that you can work with those birds that have a little bit better genetics. It's all about the genetics. If it's like I'm only 5'9". I wanted to be a 6'6" basketball player. Mom was 5'2" and Dad was 5'6". It just wasn't going to happen. The genetics weren't there for me to grow and be 6'6". It just isn't going to happen. It didn't matter how much Mom and Dad fed me or how well they took care of me. The genetics just weren't there. And it's the same is true with our birds. If the genetics aren't there, it really doesn't matter how well you take care of them. You can take the best care of them in the world. If the genetics aren't there, they aren't going to quite meet that standard. So we want to take and once we decide what we want to raise, we want to take and find a breeder to help us with that. So that's our breeding chickens. Then we have egg production. In the egg production, we show 2 females. And when we take and pick out our females for the county fair, we want to find 2 birds that match the closest as that you can get them. Ideally, you won't be able to tell them apart in the pen. They'll look like twins. And there's 2 classes in the egg production class. We have the white egg layers and we have brown egg layers. The white egg layers, what we're looking for is a Leghorn hybrid. They're going to be like, they're going to come with names like California Whites, or they might just be Leghorns. They might just call them Leghorns or egg production Leghorns. The egg production Leghorn is different from the Leghorn that we would see in the purebred class. The purebred class Leghorns would be much bigger than the egg production type Leghorns. They're the hybrided type Leghorns. And the different hatcheries have all kinds of different names for those hybrided white egg layers. You'd like those to be just coming into production in a couple weeks for state fair. It depends what your goal is. I always tell kids that, do you want to really compete at state fair, or do you want to really compete at the county fair, depending on when you actually get them? Because, some of these fairs are in mid-July, early July, and if you have a bird that's already been laying 2-3 weeks in July, it's going to be past its prime by the time state fair comes along. So you got to kind of decide what you want to do there. But just count back about. I'd like to have them for state fair. 22, 23 weeks is really a nice age. They've really just blooming at that point in time. They've laid maybe a week or 2. They've got a nice. They're still nice and bright. Everything's good about them. They haven't laid themselves out yet. So just kind of take the count back that way for that. Same way with the brown egg layers. Brown egg layers, though, I tend to see they seem to be laying a little bit earlier than maybe the whites have. I've just experienced that they've been that they've done that, or that they are taking laying a little bit earlier than maybe the whites are in their age. So, and I think some of that might be they've been taken care of too well, almost, that they've been fed really good and everything, and they just start laying a little bit sooner than they were really intended to. But the same sort of hatch date. It takes a little playing around with the egg layers. You get them one year, you might find out they're just laid a little bit too early. Next year I'll get them a week later or something like that. So you just kind of got to figure that in. You're going to get these from the hatchery. There's no reason to go to a breeder to get egg production. There is nobody that's breeding a superior egg production. And that's one of the things I really like about the poultry project is everybody's pretty much on the same footing. You're all going to get your egg production birds from hatcheries that produce it, that do that. So you all have access to the exact same birds. You can't go out and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars and buy a superior egg production bird. You're all going to be starting with the same genetics when it comes to the egg production. Okay, so that's the egg production. We got white egg layers, we got brown egg layers. And then the brown egg layers we're looking for, they're generally red stars, black sex lengths, ISA browns. Those are the names that we see most often. Every hatchery has a little bit different name for them, but those tend to be what we want. We prefer those hybrid type birds versus what we call like the production reds, the production Orpingtons, hatchery quality of some of the purebred birds. If we get a hybrid bird, they generally place above those purebred hatchery birds. So keep that in mind if you really want to compete in that brown egg laying class. The brown egg layings are probably a little more of a challenge when it comes to matching them for the state fair. They tend not to be as even in color like the white egg layers will be. The white egg layers are white, but that's also kind of hard because the white chickens are harder to keep clean. They show the dirt and everything a lot more. So keep that in mind when you take and are doing that they are a little bit harder to match up. It's probably the most popular class at most county fairs now, the brown egg laying class. I've seen several fairs where there's been 30 plus pens of brown egg layers at the county fair. So it's really grown. It used to be everything was in one class, but they split that. It's probably a lot longer ago than I think it is. Okay, market chickens. These are hybrid birds also. They're a Cornish rock cross. Okay, the Cornish and a white rock hybrid. They grow very fast. It's a great project for those that are just starting out. Yeah, it only takes 6-8 weeks for you to have a chicken for the fair, and that's more than that's ready to compete. These things grow unbelievably fast, and they're ready for market in that 6 to 8 weeks. So if you don't have a facility to keep birds this time of year or when it's cold out, a broiler project is an excellent project to take and use for the fair. Again, in this class we show 2 females or 2 males. Now you can't have one of each. You got to have 2 males or 2 females to show. You may need 2 sets of birds if you're planning to go to state fair, unless you have a really late county fair. Mid-August, one of those that are just a week or so before state fair, you can get away with 1 hatch. But if you got a July fair or early August even, you probably need to have 2 batches. One that'll be the right age for the county fair, and one that'll be the right age for the state fair. And they are, and you're going to get those from the hatchery also. Again, there's no place you can go to get a fantastic superior market chicken. You're just going to go to the hatchery. The different hatcheries you may like some birds better than other birds. They're strain of birds, but they're all basically the same bird. So you're going to go to a hatchery for those type of birds, or your local feed mill, or your local feed store where they get baby broiler chicks in. That's what you're going to take and get. So just count back from your fair. 6-8 weeks, depends on the size that you want. Now at the state fair, they split this class by weight. So I think I have the slide coming up on that. We'll talk about that when we come up a little bit further. But that's your market chickens. And again, this is why I like the poultry project. Everybody's on the same footing when it comes to their market birds. It's going to be all about how well you take care of them and your feed. It really shows up in the feed too. You may find a big difference in the feed that you get from one place versus another place, and that too can take some experimenting to get with, or to figure out which one's which or which one's best. Okay, here's my. I thought I had one. 2 classes at the state fair. There's a fryer class. It's under. I think I have that wrong. It should be under 6 pounds. I think we agreed that that's probably going to be 6 pounds. Was that right, Vern? I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be under 6. I think I screwed that one up.
But yes, it should be under 6 pounds and then 7 to 10. Or then it's 6 to 10.
6 to 10. Yep. I'm sorry. I gotta fix that. Mark that down. We weren't absolutely sure about that, so we're pretty sure it's 6 is the cutoff. So it's 6 and under at the state fair, and then 6 to 10 at the state fair for the roaster class. And they'll weigh them at the state fair. I don't think even on the registration form you make a designation on it or anything. It's just done at the state fair that they do that weight. And there's also a thing, the bottom line is an important one. If the birds are over 10 pounds, an automatic white ribbon at the state fair. So keep that in mind if the birds get too big. And they get big fast. When they get up to that 6-7 pound range, I mean, the next week they're at 8-9 pounds. And next week after that, they're over that 10 pounds. So it can be very quick. I've seen birds that are only 8 weeks old that are over the 10 pounds already. They just grow very quickly. So keep that in mind. And some of you are going to find that some, your feeding program, whatever it is, they grow faster than others. So, but we want them to grow quickly, and that's how they do it. In the commercial industry, the ones that you buy in the chicken you buy in the store, they're going to market at 6 to 7 weeks of age. That's when they're heading to market. So they do grow quickly. All right, so that's all the classes and the chickens. Now the ducks. We have breeding ducks. Again, we're going to the standard perfection. That we look for breeds that are in the standard perfection, that book we talked about earlier. It tells us what they're supposed to look like. We show 1 male and 2 females. And the females you want to match the best you can. It should look like twins if possible. Again, they have to be the same breed and the same variety. So we want both the same breed and the same variety in the same pen. We also have large fowl and bantams in ducks. So but they're not necessarily the copy of each other. They're kind of unique amongst themselves in bantams and large fowls. It's based on their size. So we have large fowl. Hatch dates, I'd say March, April. Ducks too can get out too early, and they'll start laying, and then their bills will fade and stuff, and they won't look really good for county fair when they're in their breeding class. You can get them from a breeder or a hatchery. It's a little tougher to get them from breeders than it is the chickens. There's just not as many waterfowl breeders around. In that breeder list that we have on your screen there's a download file that you can click with breed list. You can find some people on there that do have ducks. I think the main one is probably Ewert's. They put out some very nice birds for 4-H'ers. So that's a place you can go there. Otherwise, you'll have to go to a hatchery for them. And the hatchery birds tend to be a little bit small in size for large fowl. Bantams, they mature a little bit faster. You can hatch them maybe a little bit later, but I still like to get them out to get them mature as early as you can. It's a little tougher to get ducks to start early than it is chickens. Chickens, we can kind of trick them into laying and breeding pretty early. Ducks are a little bit tougher. A lot of times you can get the females to lay, but the males won't do their job early on in ducks. So it can be a little bit harder to get young, or get them out a little bit earlier. Plus, it's also harder to take care of a duck early in the season because they're a lot messier than a chicken is, and you have to have facilities that can accommodate them in that cold weather. The Bantam ducks are a little bit tougher. I think it's one of the hardest projects in the 4-H poultry project. It's just tough to get little ones, except for mallards. I don't know why we don't see more mallard ducks in a Bantam breeding class, but we just don't see many of them. We tend to see call ducks, or well, there's only really I think 3 breeds that you can show: the call ducks, the East Indies, and mallards. So. But mallards, they will reproduce pretty easily. Now, the one thing we see in ducks is we tend to see pens that maybe have 2 males in them, or 3 males, or 3 females, because people don't know how to tell the difference between a male duck and a female duck. Well, you can tell by the quack. That's the best way to tell their age. Everybody says, well, look at the sex feather. On the males, there's a little feather in the back that curls up on their tail. Well, a lot of breeds don't get that till they're very mature, and they're just not that old by the county fair. They don't have it yet. So you tell by the quack. So the male duck has a very slow, methodical quack. I hope you can hear this. Let me know if you can. Were you able to hear that? Okay, good. You can hear that. All right, that was a male duck. Okay, had that very deep, methodical quack, 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 quack. Now the female duck has that very quick quack to it. Okay, has that very quick. They're probably the ones that you're hearing if you have ducks, are the females. You don't really hear the males that much. You hear the females. They're just busy quack, 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 quack. I don't think the female duck was quite as good as the male duck recording was, but that's the difference. That's really the best way for you to tell is by that quack. And they're like kids, the males especially, about around that 6 to 8 week mark. They kind of go through a voice change, so they'll be real hoarse and raspy when they're quacking. But they'll be that slower quack. They won't have that quick pattern to it like the female will. So hopefully that'll get everybody to bring the right sex of ducks to the fair. Okay. The next one is the market ducks. The market ducks are 2 females or 2 males, just like the market chickens. You can show either one, but they have to be the same. So you have to have 2 females or 2 males. Okay. And again, you want to match as close in size and shape. Everything is matched as best you can within that pen of ducks. We tend to see the large breeds in the ducks. If you've ever eaten a duck, you know there can't be too much duck on a duck. So the bigger the better, generally in ducks. And for the most part, it's Pekins or Muscovies. Muscovies certainly can compete. We've had Muscovies win at the state fair. The thing with Muscovies is they're just tough to get out early enough to get some size to them. So, but if you can get them out early, they certainly can compete well with a good Pekin. And apple yards aren't that bad of a choice either. They tend to grow fairly quickly and get some good size to them also. We generally prefer the lighter colored breeds. Black. We don't like if you're taken and processed the duck. If it has dark feathers, it tends to leave dark pins or dark, what they call it, the quilled pin feathers in the skin. So you get these little black dots in the skin. It doesn't look as pretty as like a light colored duck will look. Okay, so that we tend to like the lighter breeds if we can possibly get them. Again, hatch them March, April. Now you can use the same ducks in breeding ducks as you can in market ducks. Like people will get Pekins or Muscovies, and they'll show them in breeding class, and they'll show them in the market class also. So you can do that also. The market class does not necessarily have to be a purebred bird like it does in the breeding class. So if you do have some crossbreds, you could possibly show them in the market duck class. Again, you'll get those from a hatchery or a breeder. And stick with the larger ducks if at all possible. Those runners don't have much to eat, so So if you're raising runner ducks, they're not going to compete very well in a market class. Geese. Again, we got breeding geese, and that goes back to the standard. You want a breed of geese that are in the standard of perfection. You're going to show one male and two females of the same breed and variety. The earlier you can get them, the better. It just takes a while for them to grow and mature. You're kind of at the mercy of the hatchery or the breeder when you can get geese. They are kind of on their own schedule. It depends on the spring and the weather and that kind of stuff. I don't know of anybody that tries to force geese into production really early. Just not an easy thing to do. Again, it's kind of like the ducks. You might be able to get the hens to lay, but to get the males to do their thing is a lot tougher and early on. So geese, one male, two females. Now, how do you tell a male goose from a female goose? For the most part, they have to be vent sexed, and that's a little bit tougher to do. What I tell kids to do is, if you got geese, pick a big one for the male and pick two smaller ones for females, and you're probably going to be okay. Unless you get somebody that's really being particular about it and actually tries to vent sex. They're just usually too young to be reliably vent sex by county fair. So a big one and two small ones is probably the best advice I can give you when it comes to males and females at the county, at the fair. Market geese. You have to have two males or two females. Get two that are the same size. That's really the big thing there. Match as close to shape and size as possible. And again, hatch as early as possible. Now, unlike the ducks, where we want the biggest breeds of ducks, I really don't mind the smaller breeds of geese in the market geese class. I mean, not everybody needs a 30, 40-pound goose for the kitchen table. You know, some of these nice, you get a nice solid china, that makes a nice 10, 12-pound goose that's got some meat on it. It makes a nice table bird. And I think it was 2 years ago we had some chinas that were reserve champion at the state fair, if I remember right. So, not necessarily like the ducks where the smaller breeds can't compete. Here it's going to be if they're matched well and they have some good flesh on them and finished well and that kind of stuff. So the smaller breeds, it'll depend on your judge though. Some judges won't go for the smaller birds, but others will accept the smaller birds in the market goose class. Also the geese, any of the geese, ducks, turkeys, if you want a project that's going to get you to the state fair and compete at the state fair, those are excellent choices. There just aren't that many people raising them. So we want to get more people raising those particular classes of birds, especially the turkeys and the geese. There really is very few of them around. So, okay. The breeding turkeys. Am I still... everybody can still hear me? Yep, okay. All right. My daughter said she lost it on her computer. I just want to make sure everybody didn't lose them. Breeding turkeys. Again, we're going back to the standard perfection. We want one male, two females of the same variety. This is always a trick question when it comes to showmanship. How many breeds of turkeys there are? There's only one breed of turkeys. There's 7 varieties. I think it's 7. Probably get myself in trouble there for saying that. So we want the same color birds. Generally, when it comes to purebred turkeys, the earlier the better. It's very tough to get turkeys early enough to get mature enough to raise for the county fair. And you get them from a breeder or a hatchery. In market turkeys, we show 2 females or 2 males. We use broad-breasted whites or broad-breasted bronze for those. Those are hybrid turkeys. They're not the purebred turkeys. They're hybrid turkeys. They have the very huge breasts on them. They grow very quickly. They also can't reproduce naturally. They're artificially inseminated and they're just not a type of bird like this. We do see these in the breeding class, unfortunately, but they really shouldn't be in the breeding class because they aren't a purebred. They aren't a purebred turkey. So, but broad-breasted whites, broad-breasted bronze, nice market turkeys, match as close to size and shape as possible. Hatch dates are again March, April. I shouldn't say a breeder here. They should come from a hatchery. They'll come from a hatchery. The broad-breasted whites and the broad-breasted bronze. And again, there are 8. I knew I was going to be wrong on that. Again, it's just like the market chickens. You go to a hatchery for these broad-breasted birds, and you're always kind of on the same footing when it comes to turkeys. And with turkeys, they're a little tougher to get started. In that first couple weeks, a turkey will take and find any way it can to kill itself. They just do not like to live in that first couple of weeks. But once you get past that point, if you can keep them going for us that first week or two, turkeys are pretty hardy and they do very well. It's just that first initial start that can be a little troublesome with turkeys, and it can take some experience. You might have to, you'll learn that first year especially some things to do with turkeys. But guineas, this is something fairly new in the 4-H project. It's only been around maybe 5 to 7 years, maybe it's probably been more than that. Again, we have breeding guineas. Yeah, 1 male, 2 females. Again, the standard perfection is what tells you what they look like. There's 3 different varieties of guineas. We got whites, pearls, and lavenders. That can be shown in the breeding guineas. Hatch them as pretty much as early as you can. That's another thing with the guineas that can be kind of troublesome, is they're a bit tough to get early. But once they do decide to set, I don't know if you ever raise guineas, they can come off the nest with 25, 30 babies. One guinea hen can. So they're not for the tame of heart. I mean, they're a little bit of a wild bird, so you keep that in mind also. They're not the easiest thing to take and work with. But guineas, I do see some guineas. If you want to compete at state fair with guineas, if you get them to the state fair, you're probably in the top 2 or 3, because there's probably only going to be 2 or 3 different pens at the state fair. So another good way of getting to the state fair and maybe winning at the state fair. And then we have market guineas. Again, 2 males, 2 females. Match as close possible in size. And the earlier you can get them, probably the better. And again, you're again from a breeder or a hatchery. Okay, so that's the guinea project. And if you're going to raise guineas, I recommend that you have a place that's kind of enclosed, that they don't run wild, because once they get running wild a little bit, they can be very tough to get a hold of again. We always joke that most guineas are picked out for the fair at night, because that's the only time you can get a hold of them is in the dark. So that's guineas. Now pigeons. That's another one. This is another one. If you are not, if you don't live out in the country, you can't have chickens or other poultry projects in town. Most towns will allow pigeons. So if you live in a city or something, you can have some pigeons. There's 3 different classes of pigeons. There's utility, flying, and fancy. And you can show either a breeding pair, which is 1 male and 1 female that are over a year old, or you can show a single young bird, and that's a male or a female hatched at the year of the fair. So that same year of the fair. You can get them from a breeder, or you can breed your own. You have to have bands on them. And these are what those bands, there's different types of them, but these bands, and they show these bands have a year on them, and they're seamless, so they have to be slipped on to the young bird. I believe it's like around a week to 10 days old, something like that. These bands slip over their foot, and then they can't be taken off, and it shows when they were born. So it gives you a year that they were born at. So you have to get these bands, and there's different poultry. The National Poultry Association sells them, and there's different supply companies online that you can find them from. so that you can have some bands. Whoever you get your pigeons from, talk to them about banding them, because there's a very short window I know that you can take in uh, band those birds, so, or they're too big and the band won't slip on anymore. Okay, so that's the birds. And if you ever raise pigeons, it's amazing how fast those pigeons grow. They go from this thing that looks like I don't know what you call it, a mouse almost, a hairless mouse, to almost looking like an adult bird in like 30 days. It just boom. It's just like all of a sudden you got a pigeon. You had this nothing and then you got a pigeon. They just grow incredibly fast. That's why those bands have to be put on at the same time. There's also, you're not supposed to show the same bird 2 years in a row, except for a young bird can be shown in a breeding pair the following year. I don't know who keeps track of that, but that's what the rules say. And the rules also say that you have to show the same bird that you showed at the county fair, at the state fair for pigeons. That's not true in the rest of the poultry project. The rest of the poultry project, you can have different birds at the county fair. They have to be the same breed, same variety, but you can take different birds to the state fair. So I know, like with market birds, you wouldn't probably have the same birds because they may be processed between the county fair and the state fair. You'd have that second batch of birds going. So keep that in mind when it comes to all your other projects. Doves. You can also have doves. This is something you can have in the house. You can have some doves in the house. I know we've had a family here in our county that raised doves, and they had them in the house. So there you show a breeding pair just like the pigeons, one male, one female, over a year old. Young bird, male or female, hatched the year of the fair. Again, you get them from a breeder, or you can breed your own. They have to be banded also. Actually, a dove is in the same. It's in the same. They use the pigeon standard for judging pigeons, and the doves are in that pigeon standard also. Again, same bird. It's not supposed to be shown 2 years in a row. And you're supposed to take the same bird from the county fair to the state fair when it comes to doves and pigeons. Okay? So that's the doves. I think that's all of our projects, all the different classes that are out there. A lot of different classes. Okay, a lot of different things. Like I said, you could possibly take 22 different poultry classes to your county fair. You could have 22 different things that you show, different pens that you show at the county fair. And some fairs allow you to have multiple entries of that same pen, so you could have a ton of different ones. And we do find that once in a while. We do find some families that have quite a few different ones. So, any questions here that we can... I think that Vern and Katrina have been going through here pretty well for you, so unless there's something you want me to cut in on, we'll just keep on going. Alright, I think they're doing fine with the chat. We'll just keep on going. Now, choosing what you should raise. There's some things you should consider. One of them is the cost. And the cost can be very little. Some of the breeders out there that are on that breeders list, they will lease you birds. They'll give you the chicks, and then they'll want the chicks back in the fall, or after you're done with them after fair. So there's really no cost in the chicks, so it's actually cheaper than the hatchery. Others will charge same. Generally, I don't think there's many breeders that charge any more than the hatcheries do. So I don't think cost is that prohibitive. The upper end of that, where I've got like $25, some of the geese can get fairly expensive goslings, just because they're very tough to take in, reproduce, and they don't produce a lot of them. So the cost can get up there a little bit for young birds or for goslings and stuff. They can get a little more expensive. Feed can range anywhere from $4 to $15 a bird, depending on what the cost of your feed is and what you're raising. And if you start with a breeding chicken Buff Orpington in January 1st, and you got to take it all the way through your fair, it's going to eat a lot more than that broiler is. That's only around for 6 weeks. So your feed costs are going to vary quite a bit. So quite a range in there. Bedding, it depends what you use for bedding, but most people use some sort of shavings. Shavings tend to work nice to keep them clean and dry, and they're fairly easy to clean out and fairly available to everybody. The straws and hay and that kind of stuff tend to not absorb the manure quite as well and stuff, and birds tend to get a little bit dirtier when they're on that type of bedding. And housing is another thing. If you're taking and raising a purebred large fowl, you need chicks this time of year. You got to have housing that can take and accommodate those chicks and keep them warm. So you got to keep that in mind. If you really don't have a great facility to take and put birds in, market chickens are very good. You know, you get them, it's nice and warm outside. You don't really need anything special other than some place to keep them dry. That's really what you got to consider for housing with like a market chicken. The other thing to consider is how much time you have. And this can vary a lot because some of these breeds and stuff take a lot of hands-on time to take and work with. So if you got lots of time and love to play with them, any of the projects are a great project for you to take and do. If you only got time maybe to take and feed and water, and you don't have all the time to play with them, maybe look at some of the market classes. They don't take quite as much prepping and that kind of stuff as maybe some of the purebred classes do. And the lucky if you see them, the waterfowl can be pretty self-sufficient. If they got a place to get water and you can throw a little feed out to them, they'll pretty much can take care of themselves. So they might be a good choice if you're really quite pressed for time. So keep that in mind too. You don't want to be realistic about how much time you have to take care of your birds. The other thing is age. You should take that in consideration. A young 4-H'er, smaller calm birds, some of the bantam classes are very good for beginners. I think if you had like a little first-year girl that weighs 40 pounds and you got a turkey that's 40 pounds, it's probably not a good match to take and bring up to the into the fair. So keep that in mind a little bit. And your temperament. If you hate it when the birds flap around and that kind of stuff, a guinea's probably not for you. They're a little bit wilder. Some of the white egg layers can be quite rowdy, quite flighty. So just keep those kind of things in. If nothing bothers you, go for those guineas. I mean, any of that kind of stuff. So keep that. Try to make sure the bird's appropriate to the age of the 4-H'er. Some of the for a young 4-H'er just starting out, something like a little buff or a little Cochin bantam or something like that, and they're pretty tame just by nature. They'll pretty much let you do anything you want. Walk right up to them and do things. A lot of the bantam breeds are pretty calm. Some of them are kind of flighty. Just ask the breeders, and you'll get a sense of how they take and behave. So, taking care of the little ones. Okay, this is we'll go into a little bit of the care here. Before they arrive, you want to have a place where you can keep them warm and dry. A lot of us start our birds in the house, and I think almost every 4-H'er that our family that has at least purebred birds have started their birds in the basement or in the kitchen or wherever they have a place and to keep them for a few weeks, because it can be tough to keep a place warm in this time of year out in a barn or someplace like that. Heat lamps are used. Be careful. Don't use any more bulb than you have to. They can be dangerous because there have been lots of people that have started fires and stuff using heat lamps. Vern turned me to this. These are called these heat pads down here. This Cozy Coop. It uses infrared, but there's no active bulb to it or anything like that. So it's much safer. If it shouldn't start a fire or anything like that. And I think he's been using it for the past year or two, and he's had good luck with them. So that might be something for you to take and consider as something like that. Try to bedding for the first few weeks is a lot of people use newspaper, and newspaper can be pretty slippery, and you can get straddle-legged birds, especially with waterfowl. And you have it in chickens too. They can't keep their legs underneath them, and their legs start sprawling out to the side. So make sure that the whatever you're using for that bedding at first is not slippery. I use some paper towels. Paper towels have got the little perforations on them. They're not slippery. I use paper towels on top for the first few days, and then they're going out on wire or on shavings once they get started for a couple days. You need a chick water. You need a feeder. And get yourself an actual chick water or feeder if you can. They're made so that the birds can't get into them. You don't want the birds to get in and get wet. That's first thing that'll kill the chicks or animals is getting wet and drowning. And a starter feed. You got two choices for starter feeds. You got medicated. The medicated chick starters helps prevent coccidiosis. If you've never had chickens on your farm or anything, and you probably don't necessarily need a medicated chick starter, it's up to you what you want to do. I know I have problems with coccidiosis on my farm, but I have chickens for years, and I just know I'm going to have it. And coccidiosis is present in the dirt everywhere, so it's very possible, even if you've never had chickens, that you're going to possibly get coccidiosis. But I've gone where I don't even use a medicated chick starter because I just found it hasn't been that effective for me. I just treat if I see coccidiosis. And the big sign for coccidiosis, if you see any, chickens will get droopy and you'll see blood in their stool. You'll see a little bit of blood in their droppings. And then you have to treat them. You either treat them with a thing called Corid or Albon is a sulfur-based one. I like Corid myself. You can pick that up at the farm store. You can generally get a whole quart at the farm store for the price that you can get a little bottle at your vet from. So I just treat it if I see it. That's what I do anymore. So it's up to you which one you want to take and do. Okay. And the ducks and geese don't need a medicated feed. You can use a chick starter. Just be careful with game bird starters. If you see that at your feed store, game bird starters are much higher protein. They're generally in the upper 20s, 28% protein. That's probably a little too much protein for chicks, and you'll get what they call sticky butts. The poop will get stuck to the back of the chicks and stuff, and that's just from way too much protein. It's generally the cause of it. So I stay away from the game bird starters for chickens. Now the turkeys, on the other hand, if you can't get a turkey starter, use a game bird starter. They need a higher protein. So turkeys do well on that game bird starters. Okay. And the ducks, they don't necessarily need a good starter. You probably won't find a starter for them. You can use an unmedicated chick starter. Even a good grower feed for ducks and geese will work just fine. A chicken grower feed will work just fine. Upper teens for protein. 20 is probably as high as you need to go. Anything after that, it's just going to be shot out the end anyway. So you don't need quite as high protein for a duck or a goose. So what to do when they come? I don't know if you know this, but you get chicks in the mail. If you're getting them from the hatchery, they'll come to your post office. So the hatchery is going to tell you when they're coming, and what you should do the day before, if you know they're coming, is to call the post office and make them aware that they're coming, and make sure that they have your contact info. It should be on the box that comes, but just to make them aware, I always like to call ahead and make sure that they know that they're going to be there, and ask them to call you and see if you can arrange to pick them up right at the post office as soon as they arrive. The sooner you can get them home and get them drinking and eating, the better off they'll be. When you get them home, well, you might want to do this even at the post office. If you don't hear any activity in the box, you may want to take a look in the box at the post office and make sure that they're still alive and okay, so that it gets documented at that point. But take them home. And I always like to take and just dip their beak into the water. Just give them a little dip in the water just to get them started drinking the water a little bit. I sprinkle some feed on the floor, not necessarily in a feeder that first day, just to give them something to pick at, easy to do. They'll start picking and watching. And then take and watch to make sure that they're not too hot or too cold. And they'll tell you if they're too cold. You'll hear them. they'll be chirping that, and they'll be huddled near your heat source, whatever your heat source is, whether it's a heat lamp or a heating pad of some sort. If they're really close to that, or all huddled together, they are too cold. You need to take and increase the heat somehow, lower the heat lamp, or cover the top so it gets a little bit more heat inside of it, whatever it is that you do to get it hotter. If they're in the corners away from the heat source, it's too hot. You generally don't hear about it being too hot like you do if it's too cold. So take and keep an eye on them, and adjust your heat source as needed, depending on whether they're too hot or too cold. If they're just right, they're kind of hovering around the outside edge, like where the heat lamp area would be. They're not huddled around. They may be like in a circle. They're sitting apart from each other. They're not all grouped tightly together when you got them nice heat. The first 6 weeks or so, you can lower the temperature in the pen by about 5 degrees per week. Or raise the heat lamp up, so you slowly wean them off the heat. Make sure the big thing, keep them dry. That's really the biggest thing. Keep them dry. Keep them dry. You're probably not going to have any trouble with coccidiosis or diseases, that kind of stuff. Dry is really a big key. You can feed that starter feed. Watch for signs of too hot or too cold. And chicks, look for blood in the stool, droopy chicks, dead chicks. And if you see signs of that, you can treat with Corid or Ambitrol. Either one of those two you can treat with. This is the most common thing that I've seen as far as disease goes with chicks, is coccidiosis. Okay, but keeping them dry really helps prevent that. So keep them dry. And same thing goes with ducks. Everybody thinks little baby ducks or baby geese need to swim when they're little. They don't. They don't need to swim when they're little. You want to wait till they start feathering out before they really have access to swimming water, or water where they can actually get wet in. They are perfectly fine just being able to drink in there, or just as long as they have something to drink. Well, here I've got that too. I don't let them swim at all. They don't swim until they're partially feathered. They don't get to go in the water. You want to take and handle your birds from day one. All little poultry, they take an imprint on basically the first thing that they take and see. So if you take and are handling them from day one, you become mom or dad, and they will treat you as that, so they won't be afraid of you. So the easiest way to tame any of the poultry is to work with them from day one. You can let them outside once they're feathered, or we have warm weather. They get chilled if they aren't feathered, so you want to make sure they got some feathers on them before you take and let them out. And once you let them out, they're pretty much vulnerable to the world. There's not a lot of defenses that they have. They're pretty susceptible to predators, so you want to make sure that you have them secure from predators. And the main predator is the family dog. I would say that of all the horror stories I hear when I'm judging, that the dog is probably 75% of the problems. Okay, so even though you got the friendliest dog in the world, they necessarily don't tend to go and just kill the chickens. What they like to do is just play with them, because they move a lot and quickly, and they're fun to chase and do all those fun things with. So be careful of the dog. I know we raised border collies, and we had a female that she's perfectly fine with the birds unless she had pups. If she had pups, she thought she had to kill birds and take them to the pups. And so whenever she had pups, we had to make sure that she had no access to any of the birds. So you just have to be very vigilant when it comes to the family dog. 6 to 10 weeks, this is when you can switch to the grower feed. And there's no magic time to switch to the grower feed. What I call the magic time to switch to the grower feed is when your bag of starter runs out. And you don't want to go buy another bag of starter. it's time to switch to the grower feed. There's nothing wrong with feeding starter feed till 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever. If you're raising five or five, six laying chickens and laying hens, that starter feed's going to last you a long time. And there's no reason that you can't just keep feeding out. You don't have to throw it away just because you've hit this magic number. So I just wait till I used up the bag, and then I go get myself the next type of feed. You can allow them outside. Be careful of sun damage, especially with some of the purebred birds. They tend, like a buff bird, will tend to get very brassy, we call it. And buff is kind of an orangey color. They'll get very brassy looking from the sun. The sun can damage those feathers. White birds, some of the white birds can get, we call it brassy too. They get kind of a yellowish tinge to them. So we be careful with when it comes to the sun, that they can damage the feathers on there and make them discolored. So be real careful with that. If you can keep them in a shaded area where they're not in direct sun, that's the best. I'll take and let birds out just like in the morning, early before the sun becomes too bright. I tend to keep a lot of my birds I know have problems with sun damage. They tend not to get outside very much. Again, clean and dry. That's always a big thing. The easiest way to clean up a white bird and have them ready for the fair, or any of the chickens, is to have them never get dirty. That's really the easiest way. If they don't get dirty, you don't have to worry about them getting stained. We want lots of fresh waters. In this time frame, 6 to 10 weeks, the broilers are probably going to be ready to butcher. So you may already be butchering birds. And that's another thing that I should put on here to think about, is what are you going to do with the birds when you're done with them at the end? Are you going to butcher them yourself? Do you have a place to take them to get them butchered? Those kind of things. If you're going to take them someplace to get them processed, get an appointment fairly early on. Some of those places are very busy, and your birds may get way too big for you by the time you get an appointment if you don't do it fairly early on. And always handle your birds if you can. Handle those birds, keep them calm, get them used to being handled by you. Then 11 to 14 weeks, especially in the breeding chickens, you want to separate the males from the females. The males start going through puberty and start picking on the females, trying to breed them, and that can really wreck the finish on the females. So try to separate your males and your females from each other. Also, at this time, it's pretty easy. It generally gets pretty easy to tell what male and females are. You may need to pen your best males up separately. If you got birds that just want to fight each other or picking on each other, you may have to put them individually to take in and get some in really nice shape. I know my Orpington Bantams, they don't do well with the other breeds. The other breeds tend to pick on them quite a bit. So my Orpington Bantam males tend to get penned up in very small pens, 2 or 3 in a pen. Continue with your grower feed, handle them, and you can start practicing your showmanship. And showmanship is you're going to be handling the birds. That's really a separate subject. There is I think I got the video up on YouTube. I'll have to make sure that gets out. An old video that we made years ago with Larry Peterson. That was probably 20 years ago, but the information's still good. You can learn what showmanship's like. I'll try to get that out. I'm pretty sure it will. I'll put it out in the same place that I put this, or in the same YouTube place that we have this presentation, so you can take and look at showmanship. 8 weeks before your fair, you want to check for mites and lights. Odds are you're not going to have any mites or lights. They tend not to be on real young birds, but it's always good to take and check. And it's mainly in chickens that you'll have mites or lights. And what you do is you check around the vet where they go to the bathroom, and you'll be able to see little bugs crawling around back there. And then you have to treat them if you see anything. And I check weekly or every couple of weeks at least. From this 8 weeks before the fair, make sure you keep them nice and clean. You can use like 7 garden dust. You can dust the chickens with that to take and control those. Also check for broken feathers, especially in their wings. Just open up their wings and see if any of the feathers are broke. If they're broken, you can pull them out. They'll be growing back in that 8 weeks before the fair. So if you got any feathers that are broken, that's the time to take and get them pulled out, and they'll be back just fine. And it's not going to hurt the chicken to take and pull those broken feathers out. Also, make sure that you have your health papers. It still gives you time to get them for the fair. Make sure that you get your entry in on time. Most fairs, if you're late with your entry, you can't get more than a blue ribbon at the county fair. So make sure that you pay attention to when your entries are due. And again, practice your showmanship. And a couple days before the fair, 2-3 days before the fair, again, check for your mites. You're going to choose your birds that you want to go show. You may choose your birds a little bit sooner than that, even. I just don't pick out the birds too soon before the fair because they're at that age where they're probably going to change fairly quickly. Then you're going to wash your birds, and you wash your birds just like you wash any other animal that you're taking to the county fair. You wouldn't show a hog or a steer or anything like that straight out of the pen at home. You'd wash them up and get them ready for the fair. It's the same way with the chickens. I can briefly explain that. Generally what we do is we just have 3 tubs of warm water. You take, in the first tub, you're going to use a mild soap to wash your bird. You hold your bird on your hand, make sure you keep the head out of the water, of course, and you just scrub that bird, or lightly scrub out any dirt that you'd find on that bird, and just do that till you get the feathers fairly clean. The second bucket's going to be some rinse water, and again, this is lukewarm. Bath water is basically what you want. You're going to rinse them off in there. Then you have a third bucket that's another rinse pail. Some people put some vinegar in that one to help cut the rest of the soap and stuff. And that's basically how you take and wash them. Very briefly, this is how you wash them. You can clip the toenails just like you would like on a dog. There's a little quick in them. You look for that little V. It's like a little V in there. If you just want to click off, most of these birds are young, so you just can click off the very tip of that toenail. It's kind of sharp. And then the beak is the other place that you might clip if the beak kind of hangs over the bottom. The bottom mandible of the beak. You can click off that very tip of that beak, and even those two, the upper and lower mandibles, up a little bit. So if you're not sure how to do that, hopefully there's somebody in your county that's a little bit more experienced, and they can help you get ready for those kind of things. Transporting to the fair, make sure that you have the crates to transport them to the fair. I've seen some unbelievable ways that birds have come to the fair. If nothing else, get yourself some boxes so that you can transport them where they're nice and clean and dry. Then I always recommend the evening before entry day, when you're going to take them to the fair, is just take the feed away from them. That just kind of helps them clean out so that on their way to the fair, they're not pooping in that crate or whatever it is you're taking them to the fair in and getting dirty again. So it's not going to hurt them at all to be without feed for 12 hours. It just helps them kind of clean out and helps them stay a little bit cleaner when it comes to the fair time. Then entry day, I just don't like to see birds with mice and lice, especially as judging. It's almost an automatic way of getting your birds. It is an automatic way of getting your birds knocked down if they have mice and lice. So make sure that you're taking and checking them again. Crate your birds for fair. What you want to do, if possible, is take each bird in an individual crate so they're not together, so they don't poop on each other and get each other dirty. If you can possibly do that, keep them separate. You're going to check in at the fair, make sure that they have bands. Your fair may have bands that they can put on the birds. You'll have to check with your county to see if they do that or not, or you'll have to get some bands beforehand. You'll put the birds in the cages wherever the superintendent has it figured out for you to go, water and feed them. And then I always make sure to offer at least a volunteer to help in the building during the week. You're probably going to have to take care of your birds and stuff, but there's more that happens there. I know at our county fair we like to have somebody in the building to talk to the public and to make sure that nobody does anything, opens a cage door or anything like that. So it's just nice if you volunteer to take and help at the county fair and help the other 4-Hers. And that is the end of what I have for you. Now, any other questions that I can maybe have? I think that our helpers have been hopefully doing, I think they've been doing a pretty good job of answering questions as we go. Where will this be posted on YouTube? It's going to be the same place the last one was. I'll just go out here quickly. It will go out here onto, it will be in the same Riverland Sea Pro channel on YouTube. Well, that's something I should mention. Riverland Community College, that's where I work. They're allowing me to use their software and stuff to present this, so I just want to say thank you to them. The last time we did this is out there. Also, it's pretty much the same information, maybe a little bit different. There's been some things that have been added since then, but it's pretty much the same thing. But it'll be out there, and I will call it probably the same, the Intro Minnesota 4-H Poultry Project 2018. So if you just Google that, you can probably find it, and it'll come up. Otherwise, I'll send it to our 4-H coordinator, and she'll send it out to everybody. The link, I think she can send that out to the other counties, so they will know where the recording is at. Okay, can you show them? They're shown in the brown egg layers. Okay, the brown egg layers are where the blue and olive egg layers are. They are really, they don't compete real well with the hybrid brown egg layers, though. But that's where they can take and be. That's what class they'd be showing in. What birds do I breed? I breed pecans. That's probably my main thing. Pekin ducks, and then I also do bantams. We have buff Orpington bantams. I like the buff color. I have buff Leghorn bantams. I have buff Cochin bantams. We have some black Cochin bantams, white Cochin bantams. Let's see. Red Cochin bantams. I think that. Oh, and then I also have a breed called butterscotch, or a variety called butterscotch Cochins that aren't a standard breed. So they're just something I've been working on for a long time. And Vern's right. For beginners especially, solid colored birds are the easiest to take and work with. By far the easiest to work with. You get into multicolored birds, you got so much more stuff to take and worry about. And the judges got so many more things that they can take and find wrong when it comes to multicolored birds. Feather classes? I'm not sure what you mean by feather classes. Are you talking mainly about the breeding classes, maybe? Maybe? Anything with feathers? Oh, some counties have what they call a show and hobby class. And that's basically anything with feathers other than what's in our normal classes. That's a county thing, though. Anything with feathers. And I've judged some fairs like that. They'll have pheasants. They'll have like partridge, chucker partridge. I had an emu one time. That maybe is what you're talking about, and that would be a county thing. It doesn't have it. There isn't anything at the state fair like that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, and that's what you're probably talking about, the 3 feathered animals class. It's probably just a county thing. Some counties will call it show and hobby. What's the best thing to start? Well, I guess the best thing to start with is it depends what you want to do with them when you're done. If you want some chicken for the freezer, I would say a good thing to start with would be a market a market class bird. Market chickens. It's a very short time period. Very quickly, they grow very quick and stuff. If you want some eggs, maybe the laying class would be a good choice to start with. If you want some pretty chickens, start with a breeding class of some sort. In Minnesota, we do want to take and mirror the commercial industry. So we're trying to teach efficiency. Getting the most chicken for the least amount of feed, the most eggs for the least amount of feed, and that's what the commercial operators are doing. So we want to teach that economy to the 4-Hers, and that's why in our market classes we use the Cornish rocks, and in the laying classes we use the hybrid white leghorns and the red stars. Those are what are being used in the commercial industry.